Sometimes the question shouldn't be why, it should be how. Not why did you do that? Instead, how did you even come up with this idea? And the Ratty terminal is exactly that kind of question. Now, obviously the name is a play on Kitty, but that's not the interesting part. See that, now I'm focused on the screen, see that obnoxious spinning cursor I have. If I start typing, it moves like a cursor on a terminal, right? Nothing crazy. The crazy part is it's spinning. That's a 3D object being rendered in the terminal. Your first question is probably why. By the end of this video, you won't know the answer to that, but you will know the terminal exists and you will know a bit about it. Now, to demonstrate how, let's just say, strange of an idea this is, the developer has provided a number of tools to show off what can be done here. So let's go and open up NVim, and let's just, put some random garbage text in here. Okay, it's nothing crazy. Right. If I go and press Control, Alt, and Enter, that takes us from 2D mode into 3D mode. And you might already notice a bit of the rendering artifacts in the corner here, and also something's happening here. The text is going off the screen. Well, the terminal is an object in 3D space. I can rotate it, I can pan around, I can zoom. It's an object in 3D space. Now, your immediate question is, again, why? On to the next thing. If we press Control, Alt, and Enter again, takes us back into 2D mode. Everything is back to where it should be. There is a couple of rendering artifacts that do exist in this terminal. This is a very new project. It's it's more of a tech demo for the 3D rendering stuff rather than being a really good terminal. So you are going to notice random applications behaving slightly weirdly, some weird rendering artifacts. If you have it open from another terminal so you can actually see the log, you will notice a bunch of random terminal sequences not being implemented. So this is more a focus on the 3D stuff and sort of what can be done with that. Now, another thing you can do is if we press Control, Alt, and M, that takes us into Mobius mode. Now, one thing I actually didn't show you, I should probably have done that. In this 3D mode, in the Mobius mode, in both these modes, this is still functioning totally fine as a terminal. It's just the object is now in 3D space. So you can still, use it. I wouldn't say fine, but you can still use it. Like, if you want it to be upside down for whatever reason, yeah, you can. You shouldn't, but you can. Anyway, going out of that back to the Mobius mode, we can, again, rotate this, we can pan this around, we can zoom it, all that good stuff. If I press Control, Alt, and up, that will go and increase the warping, and down will decrease the warping. Is this a good use of any compute resources? No. Do I like it? Yes. Control-Alt-M takes us back out of that, or you could also do Control-Alt-Enter, and that will work as well. If you go from 3D mode, do Mobius, that'll take you out. Pressing Control-Enter will take you out of either of them. Either way works. Not only can the terminal load 3D objects, those can be in either object or GLB files, the terminal itself exists in 3D space and can be manipulated as a 3D object. It should be immediately obvious this is not built with a regular old terminal library that any other terminal is being built with, because why would it be? There is no other reason another terminal would ever do any of this. This is something very, very custom. Some of you are probably scratching your head, though, about why would you even want to do any of this in the first place, right? Like, what is the point of having 3D objects in your terminal? I just don't see it. This is very much a tech demo to show what can be done if you put your mind to it, rather than something that is sort of meant to be daily driven in its current state, right? If I go and like resize the terminal window, it has a lot of rendering artifacts, especially so if I do it like this, more so in an environment like KDE. KDE absolutely dies if you try to resize this. It slows the resizing down to like 3 FPS. It does not know what to do with this window. But I have absolutely no doubt that the KDE terminal early on, which is kind of what brought us full image rendering generally to terminals. Yes, there are things like Sixu and various other things, but the KDE image protocol is generally considered now to be like the main way to do it. I'm sure early on that also had a ton of weird issues that have now been ironed out and has led to that protocol now being implemented into other terminals like the Ghosty terminal. These ones are not shipped with the application, but we do have a number of widget demos and sort of proof of concept applications making use of this technology. The first one we have is draw. So this is a 2D canvas on the left-hand side, and as we draw things, it is turned into a 3D object on the right-hand side. So if I want to do something, yeah, I'm very mature. Anyway, if you want to draw something like that, you absolutely can go and do so. Also, the right mouse, I guess the right rat, I guess you want to call it, is going to go and erase things. C will clear things, and then Q will quit it. Obviously, this is a very basic kind of 3D, 2D drawing canvas kind of thing, but it kind of gives you an idea of like what can be done here. This could be expanded into a considerably more useful kind of application. You could have things like changing the color, changing the fill between the object, changing the thickness of the generated 3D object, controlling the rotation of this canvas. So instead of having to draw on just this singular side here, you could say, oh, I want to draw here, and then I wanted to like add something onto this side, and you could actually legitimately make a 3D object through this application. Obviously, it would be a very basic 3D object, right? But there are already examples of MS Paint clones. These aren't using the KDE protocol. These are actually just drawing purely in ASCII art, right? So this is already an idea that people have made. It's not like super useful, absolutely, but it's already something people have done. So it wouldn't even be that crazy to do a similar kind of thing for 3D models instead. Next up, we have Big Rat. The model you see here and the model you see in the videos on the demo on GitHub, or if you were to run the demo yourself, is different. For some reason, I couldn't get the model loading on my system. It was constantly throwing errors. This is weird demo code, so understandably things are a little bit off, but it does still show off the point I'm trying to show, right? This is a 3D model viewer in your terminal. So you can move it around with your arrow keys. You can change the scale with minus or with plus. I guess technically it's with equals, which is nice. If you press A, that stops the animation and puts it facing towards you. And if we press the left square bracket, that will dim it. If we press the right square bracket, that will brighten it. If we press C, that will get rid of the model. R should reset it, but doesn't. This is example demo code, so it's not supposed to be a production application. I guess there's a bug with the demo, but it should have done that. Either way, resetting the application is obviously going to bring the model back, so it didn't actually go and delete the model. Obviously, this is a very limited implementation. I would want things like being able to control the rotation, drag it around, rotate it how you feel like it. You know, mouse control generally would make it much nicer to work with the 3D model viewer. Also, just an option up here to load in a model without having to go and modify the source code directly to change the model. But this does demonstrate that this is something which is entirely possible to do. Also, I didn't show it before, but if we go and press Control, Alt, and Enter to go into 3D mode, yes, it does keep doing what it was doing in this mode already. We can increase the size, and now we have a giant spinning rat in upside down 2D space there. No, that's still upside down. There we go. Now we're back to how it should be. Also, when you go into 3D mode, you will notice that your mouse cursor your rat cursor, I guess, does start to appear. That is probably a bug that needs to be resolved. But this is very, very early on in its development. Let's say, for example, you were doing game development, right? And you're the kind of person that really loves to have everything in your terminal. You like to develop in your terminal. You like to use Git in your terminal, all this stuff. This gives you a way to basically view models within your terminal as well. Now, that's a hyper niche use case, and most people are not going to be doing that. But you can. Here is the rat you would have been seeing if the demo was working properly, and this will give you the more amusing disabling animate that I couldn't do before. Just death staring into your eyes. Very, very important. There's something about this model. I don't know what it is. The last of the demos we have is Document. This is a TempleOS-inspired document editor. We have inline 3D objects. These drawings you see here, I believe are taken directly from TempleOS and then just turned into 3D objects. This is a functional document editor. You can insert objects in line. You can obviously split lines, normal things you can do in an editor. Also, it has image rendering thanks to the Kitty image protocol. I can't think of many reasons why you'd want 3D objects embedded inline in a document, but I guess if you're showing something off in a presentation and you want to do everything in your terminal, I guess, you know what? That's actually not a terrible use case for it. Let's say you're just like demonstrating some 3D modeling work at school, at college, and you want to have those objects embedded inside of it. You could do that. Now, I think there's probably better ways to show things off, but if you want to do everything in the terminal, you can. Earlier I mentioned this is not your standard terminal framework, so an earlier project by the developer is known as Ratatouille, a Rust crate for cooking up terminal user interfaces. And when you build your own stuff, you kind of don't have any restrictions on the kind of stupid things you can do. And if you want to do something like, I don't know, making it possible to load 3D objects into a terminal, who's going to stop you? It's your thing. Whilst the tech is the main focus here, it is still a terminal that is expected to have at least some level of usage. So if we go into, also, if you tab out of the terminal, if you're out of the window, the models will slow down to like 3 FPS. This is a performance saving thing. I wish there was a way to disable that. I don't believe there is. Anyway, if we go into .config and then Ratty, and then you're probably going to have to make this yourself. There'll be a ratty.toml. This is where the configuration is done. This is just the configuration taken from the example, so I didn't actually go and write this out by hand. The only thing I have modified in here so far is changing the shell from bash over to my preferred ZSH. You can do a lot of the general normal stuff here, like changing the default settings for the terminal, how many columns you want, obviously the shell, the name of the terminal, is it like the term variable, the font you want to be using. This stuff we'll get to in a moment. You can change your keybinds, your theming, both the normal theme and the bright theme. But the unique stuff that we care about here is under cursor.model and cursor.animation. Cursor.model is all of the settings regarding the 3D model shown as your cursor. You can obviously load in a different object if you like. This could be anything. If you did the donut tutorial, for example, you could use the donut if you want to do that. You can change the brightness, the X offset, plane offset, whether or not it's even visible in the first place, and then the cursor animation speed. Let's go and change this from 1.4 to 12. Okay, and let's go and quit out of the terminal. I actually am opening up from another terminal, and then we now have spinny rat. I don't think there's a limit on how fast the rat can spin. Now, if you make it spin too fast, will you have performance issues? I don't know. Let's find out. There's only one way to find out, isn't there? Let's seems like a fine so far. Granted, I do have a 9800X3D and a 6750XT, so maybe it caused a problem at some point. You know, let's go higher. Let's go 25,000. If this causes a problem and breaks the video, well, we're gonna find out. No, it seems like it's fine. Okay, you can just have it spinning as much as you want. You always spin it so fast that it looks like it's not moving. I don't know what the number would have to be. It'd probably have to be like a multiple of your frame rate to make that happen. Somebody can work that out, let me know. Now, to make all of this work, the developer made something known as RGP, the Ratty Graphics Protocol. The documentation for that is right here. It is a relatively simple protocol, all things considered. It's pretty much just a consistent way of loading in a 3D object, so it doesn't really have to be that crazy. But all of that is documented on the GitHub page. So if you wanted to go and possibly implement this into your own terminal, this isn't everything you would need. You need to examine the code that is being used for Ratatouille and for Ratty, but I can't imagine it would be that crazy of an endeavor to do. But if all you're looking for is an example of how to actually build a widget that makes use of this functionality, that loads a 3D object in Ratty, there is this documentation here, this example here, Ratatouille-Ratty. This is a very basic example of how to do so. Obviously, you have to load in the Ratatouille libraries, and as should probably be expected with a project like this, which is loading a 3D object into a terminal, there is a bunch of random little Rust libraries, and the developer promises they are all useful and needed, but if you're not a fan of having 1,000,001 libraries on your system, well, you know, that's Rust for you. Now, I don't know how this happened. I'm not entirely sure, but if you do want to install it, obviously there is the crates version, but there is an Arch Linux package as well. Oh, that makes sense. I didn't see that before. This is the developer of the application. They're an Arch Linux packager as well. That explains a lot. Once something like this has been put out there, you have basically opened the floodgates on what can be done, on what people are going to do. You did the hard part of putting a protocol together, creating a tech demo, creating the environment that lets let's just say people with dumb ideas come out of the woodworks and implement it when they've been sitting on it for like 10 years. Like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this dumb thing that nobody else wanted? And over on Hacker News, we have some of those people. This would be nice in VR. Would it? Why would this be any different in VR than a regular terminal in VR space? You could already rotate the terminal window in VR space. Why does the terminal window need to rotate within the terminal window? I'm sure maybe there's something. Who knows? I just don't see it. Here is another one. Has anyone tried to create 3D fonts? It sounds like a ton of work, but might look cool if done correctly. You could also do really cool text highlights by working with light sources and shader effects. Another feature I'm looking for is smooth scrolling when you hit enter. I've had debates where they claim it's not possible, the text must jump one line, but I think it's possible by shifting the frame buffer up. Remember when Claude Code devs claimed that it was a game engine? The project's developer has his own video and his own channel talking about the project. Also, he has done a number of other projects in the past. It seems like every so often he just gets an idea and is like, hey, I'm gonna do that, and then does it, and now we get Ratty and various other things. But do go check out his video as well. At the end of it, he'll sort of go into the whys of doing this, but also cover that over in the blog post about the project as well, introducing Ratty. Ratty, a terminal emulator with inline 3D graphics, under which has a bit of an FAQ. I just installed Ratty, and it compiled 600 Rust dependencies. My CPU caught on fire. What the hell? Sorry to hear that. Ratty is literally running a game engine bevy under the hood, so it is expected to have more dependencies than a traditional terminal emulator. Related to that, you might realize more resource usage while the terminal is running, which is also expected given the capabilities. It is definitely not the lightest terminal emulator out there, and it's not trying to be. I know sacrificing 300 megabytes of RAM just to run a terminal emulator is a lot, but everything comes with a cost, especially the spinning rat cursor. Hopefully we can optimize that in the future. And you know what? I will say that is crazy. However, there are terminals that are just built with Electron, built with JavaScript, that also have 300 megabytes of RAM usage and don't have spinning rat cursors. So, compared to the other terminals that use a ludicrous amount of RAM, I would say this at least uses it for something that makes sense. Now, that's too much RAM for what it's doing, but at least it kind of makes sense. All I wanted was to build a terminal emulator with a spinning rat as a cursor. Instead, I might have bitten off a bigger cheese. Funny thing is, it is not the first time that this is happening, so I guess I never learned my lesson when it comes to terminal obsession. I must say, making a terminal emulator and maintaining it as an open source project is difficult. Ratty is just a fun experiment that I did to see if I could make the terminal more powerful and fun to use and not something that I expect people to daily drive. But I guess I can't stop people if you want to do that, and I'll try my best to keep maintaining the project. My ultimate goal with Ratty is to explore the possibilities of what a terminal can be and inspire new ideas and projects in the terminal space. I believe these kinds of experiments are where creativity is born, and I hope to spark some ideas for the future of terminals. I also submitted a talk to Eurorust 2026 in Barcelona, so hopefully I can share more about Ratty there. Now, one thing I was not aware of, and I feel like most of you probably aren't aware of either, is when it comes to a terminal like Ghosty. Did you know that with the Kitty image protocol, you actually can render 3D objects? So this is someone doing it in Ghosty. Ghosty is faster than Kitty, so it's just going to run better. But yeah, you actually can render 3D objects in that as well. Now, a lot of the tooling is not as obvious, and this is not really the intended core functionality of it, and people don't really talk about it. But yeah, that is also possible. So doing 3D objects in a terminal was already possible to some extent. However, having something more dedicated to that and having something that really focuses on that really brings a lot of energy and excitement into this space. Now, do I think this is really going to be a new future for terminals? We're going to see 3D image rendering, 3D model rendering for everything in the future? No, probably not. However, I don't know. It does certainly open up the floodgates to just experiment and see what a terminal can do, and maybe there is something where being able to load 3D models into a terminal actually does make sense. But let me know, what do you think? Do you think there is anything here, or it's kind of just neat? But that's pretty much it. I'd love to know. So, like the video, subscribe if you want to subscribe, and if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribes Daily Bearer Pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and watch out.